I'm 68 years old and I have not spoken to my son in 11 months. People keep waiting for me to break down about it. The neighbor across the street, Mrs. Polly Chen, she watches me through her kitchen window when I take the trash out on Tuesday nights, and I can see her face soften like she is bracing to come over with a casserole and a sad hand on my shoulder. But the truth is, I sleep through the night now. I eat real meals. My blood pressure is the lowest it has been since I was 45. My name is Howard Pritchard, and I am sitting in a rental cabin in Sandpoint, Idaho, with a cup of black coffee and a notebook full of numbers that finally add up. 2 years ago, I was living in a 4-bedroom colonial in Asheville, North Carolina, paying everyone else's bills. Now I am paying mine, and only mine, and the difference between those two lives is more than money. It is the difference between a man and a wallet with legs. This is the part where I tell you what happened. Where you are watching this from, I would love to know. Drop it in the comments. I read them. I read every one. My wife Marilyn passed in March of 2024. Pancreatic cancer. From diagnosis to funeral was 47 days. I want to say I held up well, but the truth is I do not remember most of April. I remember the smell of the lilies people kept sending. I remember signing papers at the hospital with a pen that kept skipping. I remember my son Bradley sitting at the kitchen table the day after the burial with his laptop open, saying we should probably get her name off the utilities before something gets messy. Bradley is 41. He is what my wife used to call, gently, a project. He had been living in Charlotte with his second wife Vanessa and her 2 kids from a prior marriage. He worked in what he called confronting, which as far as I could ever tell meant he had business cards but no clients. My daughter Lizette is 38, divorced, lives in Raleigh, manages a yoga studio that has never turned a profit. And then there is my youngest, Trevor, 34, who teaches middle school history and is the only one who calls just to check in, even now. The first ask came 2 weeks after the funeral. Bradley sat me down and said Vanessa's car had finally given out and they were in a tight spot, and could I cover $6,000 for a used Honda so she could keep working? I said yes. I did not even think about it. I wrote the check that afternoon. I was grateful for something to do with my hands. 3 weeks later, Lizette called crying about back rent. $4,200. I sent it. Bradley's homeowner's insurance lapsed in June. $1,800 to reinstate. Sent. Then Vanessa needed a root canal, and apparently her dental plan was a story for another day. $2,200. By the time we got to Labor Day, I had written checks totaling around $26,000, and I want to be honest with you, I felt good about it. I felt useful. Marilyn used to handle most of the kids' emotional needs and I handled the practical. So when she died, I think I just defaulted to what I knew. They needed something. I provided it. That was the contract I understood. What I did not understand was that my sister Cora had moved into my house. Cora is my younger sister by 6 years. She had been in and out of bad situations her whole adult life. Third marriage ended in 2019. No kids, worked as a bookkeeper for a string of small businesses that always seemed to fold the year after she left. After Marilyn died, Cora drove up from Greenville with 2 suitcases and a story about needing somewhere quiet to grieve her sister-in-law. I told her she could stay in the guest room as long as she needed. That was March 2024. By October, she was still there. She had taken over Marilyn's old office, set up a laptop on the desk and started, in her words, helping me get organized. I had 30 years of paperwork stuffed in filing cabinets. I had not balanced a checkbook by hand since 1998. Marilyn had handled most of the household finances, and I had handled the investment accounts and the mortgage, and the 2 of us had a system that worked. Without her, my system was a mess. Cora offered to sort through it. She was a bookkeeper after all. She got me set up with online banking, scanned my old statements, consolidated some accounts. She added herself as an authorized user on the household checking account, which I agreed to because she was buying groceries and paying the lawn guy, and it just made sense to give her access. That is the sentence I keep coming back to. It just made sense. The thing about losing your wife after 43 years of marriage is that you do not notice when small things start drifting. The fridge has a different brand of milk, and you do not register it. The cleaning lady comes on Thursdays now instead of Mondays, and you do not ask why. Your sister mentioned she paid Bradley's car insurance for him this month because he was short, and you nod, and you do not ask which account she paid it out of. In November of 2024, I got a call from my doctor's office about an overdue bill. I told them that was impossible. I had autopay set up. They said the autopay had been canceled in July. I drove home, opened my laptop, logged into the bank, and stared at 6 months of transactions I did not recognize. There was a wire transfer to a real estate escrow account in Hendersonville for $12,000. There were 3 separate cash withdrawals of $9,000 each over a 2-week period in August. There was a recurring $1,100 payment to something called Coastal Property Group that had started in May. There were 4 trips to a jewelry store in downtown Nashville, totaling around $7,000. And there were dozens of smaller transactions, $200 and $300 at a time, at restaurants and salons and a wine club I had never heard of. I am going to tell you something that I am not proud of. I closed the laptop. I sat at the kitchen table for about an hour. Then I poured myself a bourbon, the good kind that Marilyn had bought me for our 40th anniversary, and I drank it slowly, and I did not tell anyone. Because here is the math I was doing in my head. If I confronted Cora, she would deny it, and then I would have to choose between believing my sister and believing the numbers. If I told Bradley or Lizette, they would have opinions, and their opinions would involve more money flowing in directions I could not yet see. If I went to the police, I would have to admit out loud that the woman who slept in my guest room had been stealing from me for 6 months. And I was not ready to say that sentence yet. So I did what I should have done in March. I made an appointment with a lawyer. Not the family lawyer who had handled Marilyn's estate, a new one. Someone Cora had never heard of. His name was Dennis Bowerley, an elder law attorney with an office in a converted Victorian in Hendersonville, 2 counties over. I drove there on a Wednesday morning and told his secretary I needed 2 hours. I brought a manila folder of printed bank statements. I had not even gone through them in detail yet. I wanted a witness. Dennis was about my age. Reading glasses, a Cleveland Browns mug on his desk, the kind of office that smelled like old paper and lemon pledge. He listened to me for the first 20 minutes without saying a word. Then he said, "Howard, before we go any further, I want you to know 2 things. 1, this is more common than you can imagine. 2, you are going to feel embarrassed, and you should not, because the people who do this are very good at it, and they almost always start with someone who is grieving." We spent the rest of that morning going through the statements line by line. The total, as best we could reconstruct it, was $194,000 over a span of 8 months. Some of it was clearly Cora. The cash withdrawals, the jewelry, the wine club, but a significant chunk, around $40,000, had gone to Bradley and Lizette in transfers Cora had initiated on my behalf without my knowledge, that they had presumably believed were coming from me directly. Dennis asked if I had a will. I did. Marilyn and I had updated it in 2019. The house and the bulk of the estate were to be split evenly 3 ways among the children, with a small bequest to Cora. I had a living will, a healthcare proxy naming Bradley, and a financial power of attorney that named, of all people, Cora. Because we had updated those in 2023 when Marilyn was first having health issues and I had wanted someone local who could step in if both of us were incapacitated at the same time. Dennis put down his pen and said, "We are revoking all of that today." I said, "Today?" He said, "Today." He said, "We drafted new documents that afternoon. New POA naming Trevor, my youngest, the school teacher, the one who calls just to check in. New healthcare proxy naming Trevor. New will, leaving everything to a trust that would distribute according to specific conditions, none of which any of my 3 children had been informed about. Dennis recommended I move my primary checking and savings to a new bank in a different county with no one else listed on the accounts. He recommended I freeze my credit at all 3 bureaus. He recommended I order a copy of my credit report to see if anything had been opened in my name. The credit report came back with 2 cards I had never applied for. One in my name with Cora as an authorized user opened in June. One that was just in Cora's name, but using my address. Total combined balance, around $19,000, mostly at department stores and 1 large charge at a furniture store in Asheville. I drove home that evening and Cora was in the kitchen making chicken piccata. She asked how my day was. I said it was long. She said dinner would be ready in 20 minutes. I went upstairs and stood in the bedroom Marilyn and I had shared for 31 years, and I tried to feel angry, and I could not. What I felt was tired. The kind of tired that does not go away with sleep. I want to skip ahead now because if I describe every step of what came next, this whole thing will turn into a legal brief and you will lose interest. The short version is that over the next 9 weeks, I quietly dismantled my life in Asheville. I opened the new accounts in Henderson County. I transferred the bulk of my liquid assets, around $410,000, into them. I notified my financial advisor that he was no longer to discuss my accounts with anyone but me, in writing, with photo ID, no exceptions. I had Dennis send a formal letter to my old bank revoking Cora's authorization on the household checking, effective immediately, and informing them that any prior transactions she had initiated were under investigation. The house. The house was the thing. Marilyn and I had bought it in 1991 for $182,000. It was now worth, according to the realtor I quietly contacted, somewhere between $950,000 and $1 million. Asheville real estate had gone insane during the pandemic and never come back down. The kids had been raised in that house. The kids had been making jokes since Marilyn's funeral about who was going to get the master bedroom when I moved into assisted living. Bradley had even, in a moment of unbelievable gracelessness, asked me in October whether I had thought about a reverse mortgage so I could, quote-unquote, help them out a little more while I was still around to enjoy it. I listed the house on February 4th, 2025. I did not tell anyone. Not Cora, not the kids, not the neighbors. The realtor agreed to skip the yard sign and do private showings only, all scheduled for weekday afternoons when Cora was at her Pilates class. The listing photos were beautiful. The house looked like a magazine spread. We had an offer in 11 days. $968,000 cash from a couple moving down from New Jersey, no contingencies, 30-day close. I accepted on a Tuesday. I told Cora that Friday night at the dinner table over the chicken piccata she made every Friday because it was the only thing she knew how to cook. I said, Cora, I sold the house. She set down her fork. She said, what? I said, I sold the house. We close in 3 weeks. You will need to find somewhere else to live. She started to laugh. Then she stopped. She said, Howard, are you joking with me? I said, no. She said, what about the kids? I said, what about them? This is the moment in the story that I have replayed in my head, probably 1,000 times. Because Cora's face did something I had never seen before. It went through about 4 different expressions in 5 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, calculation, and then finally anger, real anger. The kind I had not seen since we were teenagers and I had broken her favorite record. She said, you cannot do that without talking to them first. I said, I just did. She said, Howard, those kids are expecting that house. They have been planning around it. Bradley has been talking about how he could buy out his siblings and move in with Vanessa. I said, that is interesting, Cora. Because the only way Bradley would have known the appraised value of this house to talk about buying anyone out is if someone showed him my paperwork. She did not answer. I said, I had an appointment with Dennis Bowerley in November. He is an elder law attorney. We pulled my bank records going back to last spring. He estimated you have taken approximately $194,000 from me without my knowledge or consent. $40,000 of that went to Bradley and Lizette. The rest seems to have gone to you, plus a house in Hendersonville under the name Coastal Property Group, which I understand is an LLC you formed in May. The color left her face the way a screen fades to black. Slow at the edges, then all at once. She said, Howard, I can explain. I said, you do not need to. The paperwork explains it pretty well. What I am telling you tonight is that you have 30 days to be out of this house. You may take your personal belongings, your clothes, your laptop. You may not take any furniture, any jewelry, any cash, any documents, or anything else that you have not arrived with originally. Dennis has filed a civil suit against you for the recovery of the funds. The papers will be served Monday. The criminal complaint with the Buncombe County Sheriff has been deferred at my request, pending the outcome of the civil case. That deferral is at my discretion and can be withdrawn. She started crying. Real crying. Not the performative kind I had seen at the funeral. She said, Howard, please. I made a mistake. I will pay you back. Do not do this to me. I said, Cora, you are my sister, and I love you, and I cannot have you in my life anymore. I got up from the table and I drove to a hotel, and I slept the whole night for the first time in 11 months. The next part, the part with the kids, I want to tell you because the comments on stories like this always ask about it. I called Trevor first. I told him everything. He cried. He said he had wondered. He had told his wife in November that something seemed off, that I looked thinner and quieter and was not returning his texts as fast. He said, Dad, what can I do? I said, you can come help me move. Then I called a family meeting. Bradley, Lisette and me at a steakhouse in downtown Asheville on a Saturday night, 3 days before the house closing. Neutral ground. No Vanessa, no Cora, no witnesses they could lean on. They showed up on time, which should have been my first warning. Bradley wore a sport coat. Lisette had done her hair. They thought this was a reconciliation dinner. They thought I was about to apologize for being distant. I let them order. I let them have a glass of wine. I waited until the entrees came, and then I put a manila folder on the table. I said, before we eat, I want to walk you through some numbers. Bradley said, Dad, what is this? I said, this is every dollar I have given you, each of you, since your mother died, including the transfers your Aunt Cora made on my behalf without my knowledge. Bradley, your total is $115,000. Lisette, yours is $83,000. Cora's separate total is $194,000. Trevor's total is 0 because he never asked. Lisette said, Dad, why are you doing this? I said, I am doing this because I want you to understand something. I am 68 years old. Your mother and I worked our whole lives for what we had. We raised 3 children and we put 2 of them through college. We paid off the house. We saved for retirement. We did everything right. I said, and after your mother died, the 2 of you and your aunt treated me like an ATM. You did not call to ask how I was sleeping. You did not invite me over for Thanksgiving. You called when something broke, when something was due, when someone needed something. The math of it is right here on this folder. You have already received your inheritance. Bradley, you have received $115,000 of it. Lisette, 83. There is nothing left for you in my estate. I revoked the old will 4 months ago. The new will leaves my entire estate to Trevor, with specific gifts to 2 charities. Bradley said, you cannot do that. I said, I can, and I did. Lisette said, Dad, you are not yourself. This is grief. This is Aunt Cora getting in your head. I said, Lisette, your Aunt Cora is being sued for $194,000 and is moving out of my house on Monday. She is the person who got in my head. I am out of it now. Bradley said, where is the house money going? What are you doing with it? And there it was. The reason for the sport coat. The reason for the wine. The reason they had shown up on time. I said, the house closed Friday afternoon. $968,000. After realtor commission and closing costs, $891,000. That money is in an account at a bank in another state with no one's name on it but mine. It is going to fund my retirement. The rest, after I am gone, goes to your brother and to a trust for any grandchildren you may eventually choose to introduce me to. Lisette started crying. Not the gentle crying of a daughter who has heard hard news. The crying of someone who has just realized a number on a spreadsheet has changed. I have seen both kinds in my life and I know the difference. Bradley stood up. He said, I cannot believe this. I cannot believe you would do this to your own family. I said, Bradley, sit down and finish your steak. You ordered it on my card. You may as well eat it. He sat down. He did not eat it. We left the restaurant separately. Bradley sent me 4 text messages that night, each one angrier than the last. Lisette sent one on Sunday morning that said only, I hope you are happy. I did not respond to any of them. I have not responded since. I closed on the house Friday. Trevor and his wife flew out the next week and helped me load a U-Haul. We donated most of the furniture. I kept Marilyn's wedding rings, the photo albums, my tools, 2 boxes of books, and the quilt her mother had made for our wedding. Everything else went. The dining room table where I told Cora she had to leave. The bedroom set Marilyn and I bought in 1991. The grill on the back patio that I had used twice a week for 20 years, gone. All of it. I drove west. I did not pick Idaho for any particular reason. I had been here once on a fishing trip in the 80s and I remembered the lake. I rented a cabin outside Sandpoint for 6 months while I figured out what I wanted to do next. I joined a coffee shop where the regulars play chess on Wednesday afternoons. I bought a kayak. I started seeing a therapist, a woman about my age named Patricia who has been very patient with me. I cook real meals. I have not had a bourbon in 4 months. Cora settled the lawsuit out of court in May. She paid back $96,000. The rest is on a payment plan that will probably take her the rest of her life. I did not file the criminal complaint. Marilyn would not have wanted me to. That was the one concession I made to who I used to be. The house in Hendersonville, the one Cora had been buying under the LLC, got sold to satisfy the judgment. I do not know where she is living now. We do not speak. Trevor calls every Sunday. His wife Diane sends pictures of their dog. They are planning to visit in August. Bradley and Lisette do not know where I live. They have my email address. Neither has used it. A few weeks ago, I sat down at this kitchen table in this rented cabin, and I wrote them a letter. One letter to both of them. I am going to read you part of it. I wrote, I am not angry anymore. I want you to know that. I am not writing this from a place of anger. I am writing it from a place of clarity that took me 68 years to find. I wrote, your mother and I made a mistake with the two of you. We gave you everything you asked for, and then we wondered why you grew up believing the world owed you everything you asked for. That is on us. I am not asking you to forgive us, and I am not asking you to forgive me. I am asking you just once to look at the math. I wrote, between the two of you, you have received almost $200,000 from me in the last year. That is more than most Americans make in 3 years of work. That was your inheritance. That was the bulk of what your mother and I were going to leave you. We just gave it to you early, in pieces, because you asked. I wrote, I hope someday you have children of your own who treat you better than you treated me. Not because you deserve better, but because I would not wish what I went through on anyone. Even the people who did it. I wrote, I am not coming back to North Carolina. I am not going to be at any weddings or graduations or holidays. I have asked your brother to keep my new address private, and he has agreed. If you need to reach me, you can reach me by email. I will read what you send. I will probably not respond. That is not cruelty. It is just the shape of the rest of my life. I signed it. Dad and I mailed it from a post office in Coeur d'Alene, and I did not look back when I walked out. I am going to tell you what I have learned, because I know that is what you are here for. The comments on these stories always say, please share the lesson, please tell us what to do. The first thing I learned is that when your spouse dies, you are not yourself for at least a year. You should not make major financial decisions in that year. You should not give anyone, including your own children, access to your accounts. You should not let your grieving sister move in. You should not, especially you men of my generation, try to fix your grief by being useful. The second thing I learned is that the people who love you call to ask how you are. The people who love your money call to ask for it. There is no overlap in that Venn diagram. None. If you are unsure which category someone is in, stop sending money for 3 months and see who keeps calling. The third thing I learned is that you can love someone and not be in their life. That was the hardest one for me. I love my children. I love my sister. I am not in their lives, and I will not be in their lives, and that is not a contradiction. That is just love that has been told the truth. The fourth thing I learned is that it is never too late. I am 68 years old. I started over. I rented a cabin in a state I had never lived in a town where I knew no one, with the contents of a U-Haul and a checking account in my own name and no one else's. If I can do it, you can do it. Whatever you are sitting on, whatever situation you are in, you can do it. I do not know how I am going to die. I do not know if my children will be at my funeral. I have made arrangements that do not require them to be. Trevor knows what I want. He has the documents. He will handle it. But I will tell you this. I am going to live the years between now and then. I am going to live them in my own house, with my own furniture, with my own money, with people who like me for the actual me. I am going to learn to fish for trout. I am going to read all the books I never had time for. I am going to call my brother in Pennsylvania, who I have not spoken to since 2017 because of a stupid argument about our father's estate. And I am going to apologize, and I am going to find out if he is still alive. That is what I am going to do. If you are watching this and you are in a situation like mine, I want you to hear me. You are not crazy. You are not cruel. You are not betraying anyone. You are just paying attention, maybe for the first time in years, and what you are seeing is real. Where are you watching this from? Tell me in the comments. Tell me your story if you want to. I read them. I read every one. And to the man or woman who is reading this with shaking hands tonight because something in here sounded too familiar, I want you to know you are not alone. There are more of us than you think. We are all just trying to get through the back half of our lives with our dignity intact. I am going to make another pot of coffee now. The sun is coming up over the lake. There is no one in this cabin but me, and the radio is playing low, and the door is locked from the inside for the first time in my adult life because I am the only one with the key. That is the whole story. That is what happened. That is what I did. My name is Howard Pritchard. I am 68 years old, and I am, finally, free. I have been thinking a lot about how I ended up at that kitchen table in Asheville, staring at 6 months of bank statements I did not recognize. The truth is, I did not get there because I was stupid. I got there because I confused being useful with being loved. When my wife passed, I had a hole in my chest the size of 43 years, and I filled it with checks. Every time Bradley called, every time Lisette cried, every time Cora said she was helping me organize, I felt for a moment like I still mattered. That feeling cost me almost $200,000 and very nearly my dignity. Here is what I want you to understand. Nothing that happened to me was magic. It was math. I gave Cora a power of attorney and she used it. I gave Bradley and Lisette unlimited access to my guild and they used it. I taught all three of them by my own behavior that the way to get my attention was to need something from me. People do not become takers in a vacuum. Somebody, somewhere, taught them that taking works. In my case, that somebody was me and my wife and 40 years of saying yes when we should have said not yet. The decisions I made after I walked into Dennis Bowerly's office were not revenge. I want to be clear about that. Revenge is hot, and it is loud, and it leaves you emptier than when you started. What I did was colder than that, and I think it was wiser. I looked at the numbers, I looked at the people, and I made the choices that protected the years I have left. That is not cruelty. That is arithmetic with a conscience. If you take anything from my story, take this. Your worth as a parent, as a sibling, as a friend, is not measured by what you can write a check for. It is measured by who shows up when you cannot. Trevor showed up. He did not ask for anything and he received everything. Bradley and Lisette asked for everything and received exactly what they had been receiving, which was money, until the day the money stopped and so did they. That is not a tragedy. That is a revelation, and a revelation is just the truth arriving on a schedule you did not pick. I learned, sitting in that rented cabin in Idaho, that character is not something you are born with. It is something you practice. Every time you say no to a request that is wrong, every time you say yes to a hard conversation, every time you choose the long peace over the short pleasure, you are building it. I started building mine at 68. You can start building yours tonight. The lake outside my window does not care how old I am, and neither should you.